Hello and welcome to today's webinar about discovering the power of women's colleges. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Paula Masad and I'm one of the Education USA advisors at the U.S. Embassy in Qatar. I'll let my other team members introduce themselves.
Hello everyone, I'm Essie Lorgali. I work on Education USA and culture programs. Thank you for joining us, and thanks for anyone who's joining us on Zoom or Facebook. Please feel free to ask your questions. Thank you.
Melissa?
Hi, yes, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining, and we hope to get lots of questions from you and make this a very engaging session. And thank you to all of our presenters. We look forward to your information. Thanks.
Okay. Well, as Education USA advisors, our role is to promote U.S. higher education and to advise students about the college application process. And part of that process involves helping students research their options, finding that best fit college or university. So today we're going to learn about a very important option for women when considering U.S. colleges. We're joined by a group of amazing women, all admissions officers from women's universities in the United States. We have Ruby Bhattacharya from Barnard College, Jennifer Russell from Bryn Mawr, Amy Markham from Mount Holyoke, and Elke Vandermeet from Wellesley. Welcome. Thank you for being here today, and I'll let you each introduce yourselves further.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for being here and for having a huge thank you to Education USA for having us. My name is Ruby Bhattacharya. I serve as Director of International Recruitment at Barnard College in New York City, and I will have my colleagues introduce themselves.
I guess maybe we'll go in alphabetical order. I am Jennifer Russell and representing Bryn Mawr College, which is just outside of Philadelphia.
And I'm Amy Markham from Mount Holyoke College in the western part of Massachusetts in the northeastern USA. I'm happy to be with you today.
Hi everyone, my name's Elke Vandenbeemt and I'm from Wellesley College, located right outside of Boston. Thank you all for having us this evening.
And just before we get started, sorry, Ruby, I would like to make sure that if you have questions, please feel free to type them in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. Thank you. And we'll take the questions at the end of the session.
Thank you so much, Paula. So with that, we will get started with our session. We're very excited today to be able to share with you really thinking about the power of what it means to attend a women's college and what that experience could be like for you. I hope in this space today that we will be able to not only share a lot of information, clear up some misconceptions that we often find that students and families may have about a women's education in the United States, but more importantly, we really want to talk about what the power of a women's college experience can be and what it would mean for your growth, not only as a student, but really as a person, really as an engaged citizen in this world. And so we'll spend a lot of time talking about all of that today. And I'm delighted to be joined by my colleagues from some of the other women's colleges as well. So women's colleges, why do they exist? What brings us together? And so the women's colleges that are here today were specifically founded in the 1800s. Now, at that time in the United States, we were all founded because at that time, Ivy League universities were not admitting women. Women could not apply, women could not attend. And so our institutions were created in response to the Ivy League not admitting women in order to give women an opportunity to engage in elite higher education. Now, in the 1800s, it's also true that most universities around the world did not admit women. Higher education, continuing your studies beyond secondary school, really was not designed with women in mind. So I love that our institutions were. Everything about our institutions was created with women in mind. The curriculum, the spaces that exist on our campus, the sense of community, how we teach, all of that is created with women in mind. You're in an environment where it really is centered around not only women's empowerment, but really being in spaces where the voices and perspectives of women are always going to be elevated, regardless of who is in the classroom, regardless of who is teaching the class. That will always be a priority. We'll talk more about that. We are all liberal arts and science colleges, so we offer a wide variety of disciplines, and so you'll get to hear about all of that as we move through the presentation today. But the first thing we wanted to kick off in our conversation with you is a question for you. So what have you heard about women's colleges? We're delighted that you're joining us, so we realize that you are likely to be intrigued. So let's pose that question to the group.
So anything that you've heard about women's colleges, people that you know at women's colleges? We've heard some things, so we wanted to see what your impressions might be. Maybe we'll advance to the next slide, and these are a few things that we've heard, and we've wanted to you know, sort of show them what's the myth, what's the truth, and where it is in between. So maybe
and we do have someone who's commented. We have a few comments coming in. Yes.
Oh, fantastic.
Jen, I'm going to go off video and I will read them to you.
All right. All right. Thanks for alerting me.
Sure.
Yeah.
So Jen, we have 2 comments so far that we've heard that women's colleges encourage women to be confident and have their own voices. Today, some people were surprised that there are women's colleges in the United States. So thank you for sharing those comments. Any other thoughts that people would like to share? And if not, feel free to share them in the chat and I will let Jen know. But Jen, you can go ahead.
Yeah, okay, thanks. I can't see everything that's coming in. Thanks so much. Yeah, so it certainly, it is a surprise that women's colleges are still here. We still have a very powerful, very important role, very proud role actually. And I think our experience has sort of changed over time. And the impressions of women's colleges have changed over time. So here we just wanted to, you know, sort of share a few things that are sort of out there in the world about women's colleges that may be true or maybe not. But one thing that we hear quite often is that women's colleges are all about feminism. And yes and no to that. We indeed are all about feminism. That is part of our place in the world, is to advance women's role. But at the same time, one thing that we find at women's colleges is that students don't walk around thinking about their gender all day. It's a place where you don't have to prove yourself as a woman. We know you're a woman. We know what you can do. And so students don't have to prove that. And it's sort of in this way that it's a little bit maybe liberating, that you just be and do what you do without having to prove anything that women can do. I'm going to read a quote here that I liked, that one of our students said, that I never feel like I have to defend my existence or my feminism. I can assume that everyone around me understands, or at least can empathize with, my experience as a young woman in the United States. And this has allowed me to form some deepest relationships I've ever had with my Bryn Mawr friends, and gives me confidence to walk into any situation. So I like that, that sort of her perspective on that. And I wanted to share that. Another thing that sometimes we hear about women's colleges is that there's a very high presence of LGBTQ+ students. And to that I'll say yes, no, maybe, we don't know. It's not a demographic that we collect in our demographic information. But I think what you will find when you are either on a women's college campus or you're talking to our current students is that you will find a tremendous sense of inclusivity, that students are very comfortable in their own skin. They are able to speak their own voices, And that certainly applies to anyone along the gender spectrum. So I think you'd be very surprised at the full spectrum of gender that we have at our institutions. That includes our cisgender sisters and all the way across the spectrum as well. Another thing sometimes we hear, or that there are perceptions that women's colleges lack diversity, or sort of these elite places with pearls and gloves. And maybe that was true at one time, but that's not the case now. When you hear about our individual institutions, I think you'll be surprised to find out the percentage of international students that we have, and also the percentage of students of color, American students of color, first-generation students, students on financial aid. Again, there's a very wide spectrum there. I think you'll be surprised. And then this is sort of my favorite one to talk about, that sometimes we hear that women's colleges won't prepare you for the real world. Maybe you've heard somebody say that about women's colleges. And to that, I like to reply, have you met women's college graduates? They are prepared for the real world. So at a women's college, and there's actually been research about this, that students really take advantage of opportunities that they might not at a co-ed institution. So for example, you may find yourself applying for an internship. You may be going to talk with your faculty during office hours. You may apply to be a leader in one of the clubs or organizations. And not that you wouldn't do this at a co-ed institution, but students tend to do it more at a women's college. And the truth is, at a women's college, it's not equal opportunity, it's every opportunity are for our students and for our women. And all of those opportunities go on your resume. and you have incredible experience and opportunity, and those things absolutely prepare you for the real world. And we all know some pretty high flyers of our alums, Madeleine Albright, Hillary Clinton, Benazir Bhutto. We've got lots of women's college graduates out there that are absolutely prepared for the real world. So no worries on that front. So those are just a few things that we wanted to kind of put out there, and we'll unpack and talk a little bit, do a deeper dive as we go along. And yeah, let's pass it along and talk specifically about the liberal arts and how that is part of our role.
Thank you so much, Jen. So Jen ended our conversation on the last slide talking about preparing for the real world. And that's something that we really like to emphasize as we think about that women's colleges fundamentally are liberal arts and science colleges and do an exceptional job of preparing students for the real world. Now, when students and often parents hear us say liberal arts colleges, and I ask a student to think about, okay, you've heard that phrase before, but what does it actually mean? People will reflect on terms and think about, okay, liberal arts, does that mean students are doing painting, poetry, dancing? And often people focus on that middle word, arts, when they hear liberal arts college. And yes, we do have students who do those things on our campuses, but recognize that liberal arts is not speaking to the list of subjects that we offer. Liberal arts is really about the philosophy of education that we have at our institution. So it's really speaking to the way we approach. So we are truly liberal arts and science colleges. Our students are studying a wide variety of disciplines across the humanities, social sciences, but very much also the natural sciences. So do keep that in mind, that you can study pretty much anything at our colleges, very much including the sciences. Now, when thinking about a liberal arts education, this broad-based approach is really the heart of the liberal arts experience. Yes, you will have a major. Yes, you will learn that major well, but when you're applying to institutions like ours, you are not applying to a major. That's often a mistake I think students, or an assumption I think students and families and counselors may have, is that they'll say to me, oh, I'm applying to Barnard for economics, I'm applying for political science. You're not. You are applying to the college generally, because at our colleges, you will have a major that will be your specialty, but you have plenty of time to decide that major. It's actually going to be the case at our institutions that you're taking most of your classes outside of your major. Why is that? We have that set up because we really believe that it's important to be a holistic thinker, a holistic critical thinker. So when thinking about global problems, like a pandemic, for example, it's not sufficient to only be able to look at a pandemic through the lens of biology, to only think about the cells within a virus. We are needing to think about the economic impact. We're needing to think about the psychological impact, the sociological impact. We are looking at world problems through all of these different perspectives. And so our curriculum is truly designed to prepare you for the interdisciplinary world that we live in. So on our campuses, you are not only going to be experimenting with a lot of different subject areas, you're going to be stretched outside of your comfort zone to learn and experience new subject areas, to encourage you to think in new and different ways. At our institutions, we also pride ourselves on having small discussion-based classes where you're in an environment where you're not just sitting in a big lecture hall hearing what the professor has to say, that one voice at the front of the room, but rather in a discussion-based environment where you are hearing from your peers from all over the world. These are the brightest, most intellectual young women coming from all over the world. Earlier on the slides, when we'll talk about this in our institutional presentations, we all have different institutional partnerships with other institutions, many of which are co-ed. And so you may have co-ed classes very well at your campus, at these campuses too. So having these different perspectives represented in a classroom, encouraging you to think in that more holistic way. A liberal arts education is not just about preparing you for the first job after you graduate. Certainly our students do incredibly well upon graduation, but the intent behind our liberal arts and science education is to prepare you for a lifelong career. In today's changing world, it's very rare that one person finds a job immediately after graduation and stays in that position for the next 40, 50 years. That used to be the case, even going back 10, 20, 30 plus years ago, but now you see that people change not only jobs frequently, they change careers. There are even careers that you are likely to have that probably don't even exist right now. So how do you prepare for that? A liberal arts education does a phenomenal job of ensuring that you are a great communicator, that you have strong writing skills, that you are able to work in a team collaboratively, that you're able to work independently. These are skills that will always be important and always be in, not just in fashion, but in very much in line to help you prepare to be a part of the next generation of women leaders. When I talk about a women's college education, we see in our world today, there's so many problems. So many of those problems impact women, but in order to see change in that, we need to prepare our women for leadership. And so our liberal arts curricula at our schools is very much designed for not just teaching you, it's teaching you not what to learn, but really how to learn, and really teaching you how to ask questions, how to creatively problem solve. And so all of that very much is a part of our liberal arts experience. Another thing I will emphasize quickly, research is a big part of the experience at our institutions. We are liberal arts and science colleges. I think people sometimes think, oh, that means you're not a research university. At our institution, there is so much research happening. Our faculty members not only teach at our institutions, they are also researching for our institutions. So our students are seeing the benefits of that, being able to engage in research, certainly in the sciences like biology, neuroscience, chemistry, physics, but also very much in political science, in English, in dance, really across all disciplines. So think about us as liberal arts and science colleges with that added plus of being in a community of strong, intentional, intellectual women.
All right, thanks, Ruby. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the distinct highlights of our communities at women's colleges. And I want to do that by focusing on 4 different ideas about community as you're thinking about, where you want to spend your college years. So the first is this historic commitment to diversity, and particularly student diversity. So when a lot of other colleges were becoming co-ed, women's colleges had to think more broadly about what a student at our institutions would be. So we were focused on maximizing student diversity on campus because we really appreciated the value that this contributes to a student's education and also your social and emotional growth. And diversity means racial diversity, it means socioeconomic diversity, diversity in gender identity, religion, global diversity. All of our institutions have students from all over the globe representing a wide range of cultures and experiences. The second piece of these different aspects of community is really validating female leadership. Women's college experience is very empowering for our students. They see that leadership, but more specifically, female leadership truly is the norm. And that's something very unique about our campus experiences. And there aren't just women on campus. We have male faculty members. We have students who are cross-registering from other institutions, which you'll hear about in a little bit. So this becomes a really powerful experience for women because they are the majority, and this allows them to work, towards closing that gender leadership gap, especially for women who are going on to typically male-dominated fields, by allowing students to seek female mentors, really imagine themselves in leadership roles, because students are constantly surrounded by female leadership on our campus. And they really learned that leadership, and certainly female leadership, truly does take all forms. The third piece I want to mention are the extensive alumni networks. Our institutions have some of the most powerful professional women's network in the world. Again, these provide really unparalleled access to women in leadership who might be in fields that you are interested in, or that you discover you're interested in once you get to our institutions. So accessing that network can be a really powerful tool in working against that gender leadership gap that many of our students are seeing in the fields that they're interested in. And then finally, I want to talk about social life and what it means to have fun, because that is also very important. And women's colleges don't present the stereotypical social environment. It is very distinct in what it offers to young women. So, for example, there are no American football teams, there are no tailgates, and these, depending on sort of what your source of information is, these are oftentimes portrayed as the very stereotypical American college experience. And as a result, there are some things that many people assume about the social experience at an American college that actually don't necessarily exist on our campus. And there are a lot of benefits to that. So we are certainly part of some larger communities that give our students access to social environments that are maybe more of the expected norm of college social life. And my colleagues will soon elaborate on what that means for each of their respective institutions. But the important part is that because students are able to choose, what opportunities to engage with, students can decide for themselves what fun means to them, whether that's, going out for a night on the town, or just hanging out in a residence hall with your friends at 7 p.m. and watching your favorite movie. It's completely up to you. You are, able to define, again, that idea of fun for yourself. And this is important because oftentimes the idea of fun on college campuses is centered around what men think is fun, whether that's, an American football game or fraternities or a tailgate. But you'll find on women's college campuses, and I think this is reinforced by what my colleagues will say in a moment, no doubt students can have a very robust social experience on women's colleges campuses. And this idea of community rings true in a very unique way. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Amy to talk about some outcomes.
Thanks, Elke. So before I get very specific about outcomes, I do want to just kind of do a little more framing and picking up on some of the things that you've already heard this afternoon. And one of the things I want to do is just share something that I experienced when traveling overseas a few years ago, and how I think it relates to what we offer at women's colleges. So there was a newspaper article that was really saying great things about the national airline, which had a career day for children who were 5 years old. And they had photos of 2 activities that the children were engaged in. And so families that signed their children up to think about possibly a career in the airline industry brought their kids there, and then they were divided into 2 groups. And they had little flight attendant costumes for the girls to wear and security costumes for the boys to wear. And I think that when you realize that from very early ages and even younger than 5 years old, there are many things and just cues and messages that we get in society that says certain things are for girls and certain things are for boys, or the reverse, that they're not for one gender or the other, that it puts some barriers on what we even think might be possible. And a lot of times I talk to students, you've heard my colleagues talk about what a confidence and boosting and empowering experience a women's college education is. And I have students sometimes say to me, but I feel empowered and I feel confident. But when you think about that example of how our society is really in subtle and not so subtle ways limiting our choices, our sense of empowerment and confidence is probably very much more narrow than we're actually really aware of, just because of these messages that have been ingrained in us all of our lives. And so really this confidence and empowerment that we talk about is like an awakening. It's a 4-year time that can kind of strip away a lot of the things that we might not have been aware of that are limiting what we think our choices are. So the mentors that we have, everything that you've already heard my colleagues say, are contributing to this breaking down of barriers that we might not have been aware that were even existing for us. And if we were aware of it, it's a chance to think about, how do I navigate those obstacles? And when I'm aware of them, I can set up strategies to work around them. And that is why the leadership positions that our students have on campus are such a great training ground for them for when they get out of our campuses and they go on to pursue whatever careers and goals that they have. They have experienced an environment that expects them to be at the forefront and to use their voice. And that's where that confidence comes in. And the mentors that are opening up possibilities for them are just incredibly valuable. So that's why there's such a disproportionate number of women who are at the top levels of government, science, business, finance, nonprofit organizations, so many different career fields. But the reality is that even though we hold up some of these examples of women who are real stars in their field, their numbers are still really few. So the exceptional women are making it, and they are exceptional because they are talented, but they're exceptional because they're still few. And we want more people up there. And so we want more people coming to our institutions and breaking down those barriers and leading at the highest levels in various career fields. And so these role models and the lifelong network that you get from attending a women's college will stay with you. It really is lifelong. And I just, another little example that I will give you to wrap up here is that if you attend a women's college, you are part of a network that even if you don't know each other, even if you meet somebody who attended a different women's college, you immediately have something in common because you made an unconventional choice to go to have a type of education that in the United States, less than 2% of college graduates have taken. And so if you're applying for a job, I can almost guarantee you that if another women's college graduate is reviewing applications, that she's going to be very interested in talking to you because she knows what you've developed during your 4 years and she knows what you can contribute to an institution. So I just really encourage you to think about all of the things that we're talking about so that you can have some very definite advantages when you go out beyond your higher education and pursue whatever your goals are. So now we get to tell you a little bit about each of our institutions, and then we're going to open it up to general questions about attending a women's college. And I was the one who organized this slideshow, and I realized I got it out of alphabetical order, so Barnard should come first. But we're going to hear from Jen at BRYN MAWR right now. Thanks.
No problem, no problem. So thanks. So yes, so this is an introduction to Bryn Mawr College. As I mentioned in the beginning, our location is just outside the city of Philadelphia. So if you know your geography on the East Coast, Philadelphia is about 2 hours from New York and 2 hours from Washington, D.C. And I might have lost my connection here.
We can hear you, but we can't see you.
Hear me. Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Sorry. It looks like I lost my connection on my computer. So, but I can still tell you about Bryn Mawr.
Yep. Sorry.
There you are.
Yes, yes.
Uh-oh, now we can't hear you.
We can't hear you anymore.
Oh, poor Jennifer.
On.
Oh.
I think her audio got muted again.
Yeah.
Ruby, you were good at troubleshooting. Well, I was going to say maybe we could advance and you could work with her, but she's got control of the slideshow.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see if I can fix Jen's audio, but it looks like Jen, your phone connection might not be there either anymore. But we can keep going, and I will keep an eye on it. We'll come back to Bryn Mawr, everybody. So in the meantime, I will join you back on screen. Hello again, everyone. To tell you a bit more about Barnard College, certainly everything that we've said thus far about women's colleges is absolutely true about Barnard. And so I want to just quickly highlight things that I think really define Barnard, not just as a college, but truly as a community. And so Barnard, of course, we are a liberal arts and science college. We're a college of 2,600 students. And so about 650 students per class year at Barnard. So at Barnard, you are having this experience where people know who you are. You're not a nameless face in the crowd of people. People know who you are. They value your perspective. We have students coming from all over the world, about 60 different countries represented. And so that idea of not being anonymous, now that's not what people think of when they think of going to college in New York City. So Barnard provides this unique opportunity to have that very engaged liberal arts experience, but also all the benefits of being in a major global city. At Barnard, the liberal arts experience takes the shape of what we call our foundations curriculum. So I highly recommend looking that up. At the heart of that, we have what we call our modes of thinking, which are going to encourage you to stretch your brain to think in new and different ways, to step outside of your comfort zone. But in terms of majors, we see students studying a wide variety of disciplines, everything from things like psychology, neuroscience, political science, dance, architecture, so really across the spectrum at Barnard. Now, Barnard is, of course, a women's college, as we've been talking about through this session, but we provide a slightly different experience, and a lot of that has to do with our relationship with Columbia University. So we were founded as the women's college affiliated to Columbia University. We exist literally in the same campus. In this photo, you are simultaneously seeing both the Barnard and Columbia campuses. So we're in the same neighborhood. We share resources. And so we are a college for women within a co-ed university. There are some majors that only exist at Barnard, things like architecture, urban studies, dance, theater. And so there are students from Columbia who major in those things at Barnard, regardless of their gender identity. So in many ways at Barnard, most of your classes are actually going to be co-ed, but the voices and perspectives of women still prioritized. In addition to sharing, we share classes. So Barnard students take Columbia classes, Columbia students take Barnard classes. And so you have access to 7,000 different classes. Our students share dining halls, libraries, clubs, and activities. So students are in Barnard student government, but in Columbia Model United Nations or the Columbia Orchestra. We share athletics. We're the only women's college represented in Division I athletics, the highest level of athletic play, as well as in the Ivy League. And of course, we are in New York City, which I like to say our students take advantage of academically, professionally, but also personally. Academically, your professors will do a phenomenal job of making you explore all that New York has to offer academically speaking. Our students are certainly taking advantage of research opportunities. We also offer internships in abundance. International students have interned everywhere from places like Amazon, Google, Wall Street. They've interned at the United Nations, truly taking full advantage of New York City. And then finally, I'll end that in New York City, our students are having a lot of fun. They're exploring the awesome food culture. That's my favorite part of living in New York City. They're going to Broadway shows. We have access to discounted tickets. So that's a very, very quick snapshot at Barnard. Just at the bottom, I've mentioned that at Barnard, we do meet full demonstrated need for all students and that we are test optional for this current cycle. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Amy, to tell you about Mount Holyoke.
Thanks a lot, Ruby. So I mentioned where we were located at the beginning, and we have about 50 different majors at Mount Holyoke, and the most popular are computer science, psychology, international relations, economics, neuroscience, and English. And about a third of our students major in STEM fields, about a third in social sciences, and about a third in the humanities. But something we've been talking about diversity, and I want to speak about the international aspect of diversity at Mount Holyoke because it's really a tremendous part of who we are. 27% of our students are international, so not only will you be learning with students with perspectives from all over the world, but also it's important to know that 2/3 of our faculty speak a language in addition to English, and 3/4 of them have lived outside the United States. So there's that real respect for different cultures and perspectives that come both in and outside of our classrooms. So with limited time, I want to just focus on 2 things about Mount Holyoke. And one is the network that we are part of outside of just our campus, and that is the 5-College Consortium, where we are partnered with the University of Massachusetts, Hampshire College, Smith College, and Amherst College. And across these different 5 institutions, there's over 6,000 courses offered and 700 clubs and activities. So our students exchange around the different campuses, and they'll take courses or join activities there, which really for a Mount Holyoke student means that you don't have to just have the small women's college experience. You can blend in coeducation by taking courses or joining activities on the other campuses. And you can also have the large university experience as part of your Mount Holyoke education as well. Our students can take up to 50% of their courses away from Mount Holyoke, so you can mix and match in any way that you want. The other thing that I want to mention that I think just really says something about the type of institution that Mount Holyoke is and the environment you'd be coming into is a real emphasis on wellness at Mount Holyoke. So between yoga classes, meditation, Tai Chi, all kinds of things like that that sometimes you see going on outdoors, there's a real emphasis on taking care of yourself and de-stressing. And during our exam period, we have a no study zone one night where everybody's supposed, you don't have to, but you're supposed to take a break, and there's activities planned and run by faculty and staff where you might play with puppies or make earrings or decorate a cake or anything like that, just to get your mind off of the stress of studying. So if you come to Mount Holyoke, you'll just find that it's a place with a real emphasis on your whole development, not just academic, but also your personal well-being. So that's it from me. And now I am going to turn it over to Elke, who will tell you a little bit about Wellesley. Thanks.
Thanks, Amy. So Wellesley is located in Wellesley, Massachusetts, which is just about 12 miles outside of Boston. So this location really combines the serenity of sort of a suburban campus with access to one of the largest college cities in the world and a major cultural and professional hub. Wellesley's campus is home to 2,400 students from a wide array of backgrounds, including over 80 countries. And its curriculum is designed to really nurture students' curiosity in a very collaborative learning environment. So our classes are small, with 18 students on average, and really encourage students to be active participators in discussion. And our faculty are as dedicated to teaching as they are to their own research. Wellesley is invested in presenting female role models to our students. 60% of our tenured faculty are women, and 24% of our faculty identify as people of color. So as a result, and in addition to our student body, a large majority of leadership roles on campus are held by women. And Wellesley recognizes that learning happens both inside and outside of the classroom, and that all of your Wellesley experiences, be they social, academic, pre-professional, co-curricular, all culminate in your personal growth, which lead to a well-rounded education. So There are 180 study abroad programs to choose from. We have funded internship and research opportunities, over 160 student-run organizations, and 13 Division III sports. These experiences are also supported by a distinctive career education program. So students have direct access to the Wellesley alum community through the Hive, which is an online networking platform. Starting in their first year, students have personalized career advisory board tailored to their goals. And Wellesley's alum network is extremely powerful. Wellesley graduates continue to be pioneers for social change, and they really serve as inspirations and role models for our students. So if you would like any more information, or if you'd like to have any of your questions answered, we'll have our contact information up in a moment. But at this time, I want to make sure that we get a chance to talk about BRYN as well. So I don't know, Jen, are you able to unmute yourself now?
I'm trying to, am I there?
I can hear you, yeah.
I hear you.
Oh, okay, fantastic. I'm not sure how I did that, but here I am. So BRYN, back to BRYN, just outside the city of Philadelphia, between New York City and Washington, D.C., so there's lots going on. We have about 1,300 students, so we're the smallest of the sisters. We're south, so our weather is a tiny bit milder, but we do get 4 seasons for sure. So we, a couple unique things about us that I wanted to mention in terms of our location and our proximity to several other colleges. So our consortium consists of BRYN, Haverford College, Swarthmore College, and the University of Pennsylvania. So the 4 schools are really in a triangle because BRYN and Haverford are basically at one point, and then Swarthmore and Penn at the other point. So the way I sort of think about it is Haverford is our brother college, Swarthmore is kind of the cousin, and maybe Penn is like the friend of the family. So you have connections with built-in connections with all of these other institutions, but Haverford is the closest, both in proximity and relationship. Almost everybody knows somebody at Haverford and the reverse. The schools are very, very closely connected. A couple other things, about BRYN, in some way we're this old traditional place, but in other ways the college has been really, I think, progressive about thinking about what opportunities exist outside the classroom to really enhance learning and give you experiential learning opportunities, whether that's internships, research. We have a very interesting program that's called 360 Degrees. And this is a program that if you choose to participate, one of your semesters, 3 of the 4 of your classes are taken with the same cohort of students. You're all focused on a particular theme or topic or question, but the 3 subjects are looking at that particular theme from different disciplines. So I'll give you an example. One of these programs is called Contemplative Traditions. The program faculty members, one is from East Asian Studies, one is from psychology, and one is from chemistry. So looking at contemplation and meditation in a culture, in a place, in your brain. And then the whole group goes to Japan. And that's the experiential learning component that's incorporated with this program, so that you have yet another perspective on contemplative traditions. So just a unique program that we offer that I wanted to highlight. BRYN has lots of traditions, as do all of the sisters. We take them very seriously. Some are fun, some are silly, some are serious, some are secret, but really part of the BRYN identity. So thanks for letting me back in. I'm glad I was able to participate.
So I think with that, we're ready to head into questions. We'll leave this slide up very momentarily to, certainly all of this information is on our websites as well, so you don't need to memorize it. But if you have questions for us, I'm going to move to the next slide. So feel free to share your questions in the chat or to unmute yourself. If you are unable to get your questions asked and answered today, certainly also please feel free to email us, and we've shared our email addresses here.
Thank you, Ruby. Thank you, Amy and Jennifer and Elke as well. We do have some questions that were submitted at the time of registration, so I'll read those out and give you an opportunity to address those. One of them is regarding age. The person says, can age be a barrier in the admission process? I'm 22 years old and planning on enrolling in a bachelor's program. Who would like to address that?
I'll take a stab at that. Actually, that's a great question. One thing that I think we all have, if I'm correct, is that we all have programs for returning adult women, and that was very purposeful in our planning, because sometimes women's trajectories are not straight between high school and college. There are all sorts of things that happen in between, including families, marriages, children, other careers. So we all actually have programs that accommodate returning women. Usually the age is 24 and over, and that's for all sorts of tax reasons. So that's a specialty that we have. For students that are maybe just a few years out of high school, we still accommodate those students. I don't know if any of my other colleagues would maybe talk about that sort of bridge in between the 18 and 24.
I think the only thing I would say is that there's a difference between completely starting your education at 22 with us, and if you've earned a degree already. But if that's the case, or you've already started a degree, I think we would all want you to apply as transfer students, or if you've already earned a bachelor's degree, we may each handle that a little bit differently. But that might be just something to talk to each of us about separately, about your circumstances.
Thank you.
That's
So another, go ahead. Sorry, did you want to say something, Jennifer? No?
No, just that was a very important and good distinction. So thank you, Amy.
So you each touched on this a little bit, but somebody's asking about the majors and minors our students can apply for. Should they choose these colleges above, why should they choose these colleges above the big co-ed universities? And you did all give great information about why women colleges are important for women. I don't know if you would like to each chime in response to that question, just with a highlight.
Sure, I'm happy to start with that one. I think, that question, I'll start with the question about majors first. Like we mentioned, when applying to our institutions, you're not applying to a specific major, you're applying to our college. And so that's an important distinction. That's not the case when you are applying to most universities outside of the United States, for example. If you are looking to attend university in most other countries, you are having to say upfront, I want to study this particular major, and here are the XYZ reasons I'm qualified to do so. That is not the intent behind our application process. We are not looking at your applications and seeing, are you going to be a good fit for our biology program? We're rather looking at your application for fit for our community in our college. And so it's a very different, it requires a different approach to the application. The intent behind our application process is truly for us to understand who you are and why you think the way that you do and what your perspective is. And so your application as you approach it, it should not be about just rattling off a resume and saying, here are the reasons I'm going to be the best biology student that, Barnard or Bryn Mawr, whichever college has ever seen. It's really about you sharing who you are and why you think the way that you do. Now, in regards to your question about choosing a women's college over a co-ed university and why you should do so, the only person who can answer that question is you. We are not able to answer that question for you because as much as we would love to be in person with you, getting to know you, we don't know you well enough to say this is the right path for you. And the only person who's going to be able to determine that is you. Women's colleges provide a phenomenal educational experience. We believe that anyone could really benefit from a women's college experience, but it's really up to you to determine what is it you are looking for within your university experience. Now, I hope in today's presentation you've come to learn that There are no deficits to a women's college that I think that sometimes the stigma or stereotype that, oh, it's, that as a co-ed university is somehow superior or better because there are men. I think as a society, maybe perhaps we're conditioned to think in that way, but I hope that you've heard today at our institutions that that's not the case. You can do anything at a women's college. And if anything, like my colleagues also pointed to, you're getting that additional extra experience of being in an environment where you are not seen differently because of your gender identity, but rather you're in an environment where it's seen as a benefit, it's seen as an asset, it's seen as an experience that makes you a better critical thinker and future leader of this world. So I hope that that helps to answer that question, but truly, we can't answer that. That's something you would need to answer.
Thank you, Ruby. So we have, and I saw you had put up a slide that touched on scholarships, and so somebody's asking what scholarships are offered, and I don't know if you'd like to sort of give an overview if you're international students.
Happy to talk a little bit about financial aid. So thank you for going back to the financial aid slide. I mean, I think probably the most important piece here is that all of our institutions meet 100% of demonstrated or calculated need for students. So each of us are a little bit different, but sort of the quick overall synopsis is that our institutions offer extremely robust need-based financial aid for students who have demonstrated some sort of financial need. We are also, I believe all of our institutions are need blind for, well, I would encourage all of you to sort of reach out to individual institutions if you have questions about our aid policies. But meeting 100% of demonstrated need essentially means that if you apply for aid when you submit your application to any of our colleges, we will sort of take the amount of money your family is able to provide towards your education. We subtract that from the total cost of tuition, and whatever is left over, we guarantee to meet in a financial aid package that hopefully makes our institution affordable for you. Some of those need blind, need sensitive aspects of financial aid do differ based on institutions. So my advice is really to make sure that you have the correct information for each individual institution as you're making your decisions, so that you can truly make an informed decision and choose schools that are going to be financially feasible for you and your family.
I think often an important distinction to make too is the difference between scholarship and financial aid. Since the question is often, tell me about your scholarships. Now, it's important to recognize that our institutions are predominantly providing financial aid, which is determined based on your family financial situation. So that's not tied to your academics, it's not tied to test scores, it's not tied to how much we like you, it's nothing like that. It's completely dependent on your family's ability to afford our institutions. So that's financial aid. Now, scholarships might be more what you hear as referred to as merit aid, which those may be tied to an academic performance, it may be tied to a test score, it may be tied to a certain talent. At our institutions, the aid is predominantly need-based, and we all have different policies when it comes to that merit-based scholarship. So keeping that in mind, there is a difference between financial aid and scholarship.
I'd like to just make one clarification that often confuses students in the whole aspect of meeting full need. And so we talk about the financial aid award makes up the difference between what the family can contribute and what the total cost of attendance is. What's confusing is that the financial aid application, there's a place where families are asked to indicate how much money they think they can contribute. That does not necessarily mean that your financial aid award is going to be based on that amount. We're just trying to get a sense with that question of how is the family viewing their circumstances. But what will happen is that all of the other information that's collected on that form will be used by our financial aid offices to make their own determination of how much they think based on the size of your family, whether you own a home, do you have debts, are you caring for extended family members, do you have siblings attending colleges or universities, all of those things, they will decide how much they think your family should reasonably be able to contribute. And then that is the figure that we will make the bridge between that assessment from our institution and the total cost. Where sometimes I find that students will say, well, I applied for this much financial aid, and they're looking at the difference between what they said their family could offer and the total cost. That is, it's a small but really important distinction.
Thank you, Amy. As long as we have this slide up, there is another question about how have you adjusted your admissions process due to COVID? And I see that you have some test optional, looks like some of you have gone test optional. Who would like to address that question? The admissions requirements during COVID. Anybody want to jump in on that one? Elke, you want to? Oh,
yeah, I'm happy to touch really briefly. I mean, I think the PowerPoint slide really speaks for itself in terms of our policies, but I do just want to reinforce the fact that that word optional truly means optional. So, you know, if we want students to really feel empowered, we realize that access to testing has been extremely disrupted for students across the globe in the past year. We want students to feel confident submitting their applications without testing this year as a result of that. It is not going to be something that is going to harm the way in which your application is reviewed or your candidacy for admission. So just sort of a reminder that all of our institutions are test optional, and this is within the context of understanding that your ability to take one of those standardized tests has been, you know, maybe has been completely eliminated because of COVID-19. So we completely understand that.
thank you. Another important question that we've gotten a few different times is about safety and security for students on campus. And this is a very important issue for many young women on campuses. And could you address that? I don't know who'd like to start.
I'll jump in. Just before I have to sign off, I'll have to sign off in just a moment. But I'll jump in by saying women think about our security differently and than men do. We have to, and we do. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about being at a women's college is that we have our antenna up in a different way than men would. So we have public safety that looks out for us. We look out for each other, I think is one of the, perhaps one of the most important things about safety and security. We all publish our statistics. So if you want to know about, you know, statistics of what things have and haven't happened on campus, that's actually something that the US publishes for all different institutions. So if you wanted to know that level of detail, you can also look at that. Anybody else?
I would add that this is another reason for a small college like ours, because you don't know absolutely everybody, but faces are familiar and you kind of know who you pass when you're walking from one class to another, and you notice when something doesn't seem right. And I think that's just all the more reason to think about a place that's truly a community where people support each other. And even the way our institutions responded to COVID, you know, most of our students went home last spring, but a lot of us still had students on campus, and we looked out for them and, you know, gave them a place to stay, kept giving them food, had still the same security in place for them. So, you know, the security measures are great, but it's enhanced by just the fact that we are all very tied to each other and we look out for each other.
Thank you. And I realize that our time is up. I want to thank you so much for joining us today and presenting about women's colleges. It was very informative. I started out at a women's college when I began my studies a long time ago. And it was a very transformative experience for me as a young woman. So I really admire all the work you're doing, and I'm excited to learn about your colleges. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much, Paula. And thank you to Education USA for hosting us.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it. Please be well, everyone. Please be safe. And please be in touch if we can help with anything. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.